Rishi Sunak. He's 20 points, or his party's 20 points behind Labour in the polls. He needs to land some blows on Keir Starmer. He needs to, as we were saying earlier, he needs to force him to take some policy positions that he doesn't really want to take. And that's one of the reasons why the Conservatives have proposed having 6 debates during the course of the 6-week campaign. And Keir Starmer seems to think that 2 or 3 will more than suffice. You want to, what you want to do if you've got a massive lead in a campaign is to avoid moments which could change the course of the campaign.
Yeah.
And TV debates, we know, can, but only occasionally, change the course of the debate.
And this is the challenge that Rishi Sunak is going to have. First of all, obviously, he's almost a billionaire. He's extremely wealthy. But second of all, yes, inflation has come down, but prices are still significantly higher than where they were 2 years ago. And people can't afford to buy the things they used to buy. Some people aren't getting by. I mean, the Trussell Trust earlier this month released that they handed out 3.1 million parcels in the last year, the highest that they've ever done. And so I think the reason why you're seeing Keir Starmer go hard on his working class roots, go hard on understanding what the cost of living crisis is because outside the Westminster bubble, away from, talk of national service and MPs backing reform and all this sort of kind of, chatter, is the reality that many people are going to supermarkets and can't afford it. Many people are renewing their mortgages and are absolutely horrified by how high interest rates are. So I think Labour has tapped into that, particularly as the party which traditionally is supposed to stand with people who are struggling to make ends meet. And I imagine you'll see Labour go harder on this in the days and weeks to come.
Yes.
And, and also things like, abolishing the VAT-free taxation on private schools, it's going to be very hard for the Conservatives to criticise that policy during the cost of living crisis. Labour really are going in hard on this, and I think it's a wise strategy because polling shows consistently it is the number one priority for people at the moment.
Yeah. What do you reckon, George, that this is sustainable as it is, with Keir Starmer now doing empathy, making that, or trying to make that kind of connection, while his party and he play it safe when it comes to policy? I mean, I've certainly been hearing, you may have been hearing, Gordon Brown. He's been sort of in contact, as it were, behind the scenes. He wants Starmer and Labour to be a bit bolder, to come up with some more, maybe retail offers, something a bit more concrete by way of ways of improving the state, something more to look for and hope for and wait for, even if that means being a bit bolder on public spending. I mean, is that kind of advice going to be heeded? Will there be a bit more of the retail to the Labour pitch now, do you reckon, as the weeks go by?
I doubt it. I mean, there may be a few more retail offers. They may have sort of, in case of emergency, break glass type offers if the polls start to narrow alarmingly. But at the moment, all the indications are that they're going to play it as safe as possible, de-risk things. The last thing they're going to do is follow Gordon Brown's advice and come up with new spending plans, which the Tories will then say represent a tax bombshell. So I don't think that's advice that they are going to follow. I mean, I think, to pick up on Nadine's point, I think they're probably right that the general mood of the country is that they've had enough of the lot who are in power, have been in power for 14 years. They want to be reassured that changing personnel in number 10 would be safe. And they've also had enough of politics, and they've been through quite a lot in the last 14 years. They want a bit of peace and quiet. And actually, having a slightly boring, technocratic bloke in charge, Keir Starmer, may be the mood of the times. Now, what the Tories have got to try and do in the course of this campaign is to flush Keir Starmer out and force him out of this comfort zone and make him confront things that they're throwing. That's why Rishi Sunak's coming up with all these new policy ideas, because he wants to try and disrupt Labour's campaign plan and force Keir Starmer to react to an agenda that they're setting. So obviously he hopes that Keir Starmer will find it difficult to argue against the reintroduction of national service, instead of which Starmer says it's all a bit desperate, we're not going to take money out of the levelling up pot, it's all a bit crackpot, you can't even explain how it's going to work. So that didn't work, but they will keep trying that until they try to get Keir Starmer out of his safety first zone and engaging on their terrain.
Yeah, I wonder, Nadine, will Labour stick to that pretty clear strategy, or will they be tempted off to say something a bit more, to try and compete a bit more like for like with Rishi Sunak by promises and offers with still 6 weeks to go in this campaign?
I think they're going to have some sort of kind of policy offerings. Otherwise, when it comes to the debates, I don't really know what they're going to say. I mean, there's so much to criticise, in terms of when you've been in government for 14 years, many things go wrong, some within your control, some outside of your control. Unfortunately for the Conservatives, there's been lots of both. But I also think that Labour, and it's not just something that the Conservatives have criticised. There have been concerns among their own MPs that there isn't really a solid policy offering that Labour are kind of going out and showing to people. So I think they're going to have to. I mean, they're going to have to release a manifesto, so it's going to have to be full of policies.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to see anything particularly radical, and purely because the fiscal situation is so tight. We may see reform, low cost reform, and different kind of ideological approach to things. But when it comes to the real transformative stuff, which is spending, I doubt it. But I also do think neither party is really going to want to talk much about public spending because the fiscal situation is so tight. And it does feel like there's a bit of a conspiracy of silence going on in terms of the kind of outlook on public services and public spending post the 2024-2025 spending period. Economists are shouting from the rooftop saying we're going to be seeing really deep cuts unless more money is announced. So I think you'll also see both parties kind of avoiding that because it benefits both of them.
And you mentioned the TV debates. There's going to be at least two for ITV and the BBC. Who do you reckon, George? Who should be looking forward to those debates? I mean, the normal, in as far as there's such a thing as normal when it comes to an election and TV debates, is it's the Prime Minister who wants to hold off TV debates because they elevate the opposition leader and they've got the benefit of incumbency and all the grandness that goes with all of that. Now it's Rishi Sunak who wants them every week because he's obviously the underdog and chasing the polls. But who has got most to fear? Who's got most to gain when it comes to those debates?
Well, I think you just answered the question there, John. The person with most to gain it's got to be Rishi Sunak. He's 20 points, or his party's 20 points behind Labour in the polls. He needs to land some blows on Keir Starmer. He needs to, as we were saying earlier, he needs to force him to take some policy positions that he doesn't really want to take. And that's one of the reasons why the Conservatives have proposed having 6 debates during the course of the 6-week campaign. And Keir Starmer seems to think that 2 or 3 will more than suffice. You want to, what you want to do if you've got a massive lead in a campaign is to avoid moments which could change the course of the campaign.
Yeah.
And TV debates, we know, can, but only occasionally, change the course of the debate. The most famous one we can all remember, of course, was back in 2010 with Nick Clegg and the start of Cleggmania. Other than that, actually, to be fair, often they don't really change the dynamic all that much. But certainly they are potential game changers during a campaign.
All right, we're gonna park that there just for the moment. I want to pass on something that seems to me to be a very useful tip. Now, if you haven't downloaded it yet, the Times app, it is the best way to discover all the reporting and commentary in the Times. Of course, it's so easy to download. As a digital subscriber, you will get full access to all the stories, the features and the interviews and the puzzles. You just need to head to the App Store or Google Play and search for The Times. Everything else will be all that you need. Now, here on Peanut and Friends, I've got George Parker from the Financial Times and Nadine Bachelor Hunt from Politics Home. In a moment, we're going to be talking about what's next, not just in the campaign, but for those MPs who are quitting politics at this election, those who are maybe going to be made to quit politics at the next election, the sort of post-election life, the jobs market for our politicians. Let's talk about that and get George's and Nadine's thoughts on that, and yours too. Send me a text, send me a tweet, tell me what you're thinking. George Parker and Nadine Bachelor Hunt here with me. Always good to hear what you are thinking. I'm going to just share with you this. It's in from Richard Brown on Twitter. It says, just listening to George Parker on Times Radio, why do we have politicians of the same high calibre as political journalists? You can have that one.
Richard.
You can have that on the house.
No, sure. I don't think Richard's a relative of mine, but it's very kind of him.
He's always a man of great judgment and sense. Now, look, let's just talk, shall we, about the jobs market for our politicians as we launch into the election, with an election not so far away. We know a record 78 Conservative MPs have just announced they won't be seeking re-election. It's the most for any post-war general election. And among those quitting, we've seen big beasts like Michael Gove, of course, and Andrea Leadsom, Theresa May. Some have been coy about their future plans. New analysis from The Times shows many of them have already got, well, in many cases, quite lucrative post-election jobs. There's Sajid Javid, who's nabbed a 300 grand a year position at Centricus. That's a London investment firm. You've got Brandon Lewis, 160 grand, acting as an advisor for 3 firms. Nadeem Zahawi, famously starting his brand new job next week. He's the non-executive chair of the very group. He spent a lot of last year working on a memoir it's due to come out in August. Other MPs, they're offering their services to speakers. You've got the former COP26 president, Alex Sharma, making more than 130 grand from speaking. And you've got the former Prime Minister, as I say, Theresa May, raking in 400 a grand. I mean, there is a world after politics for these MPs. Well, at least some of them, the big names can land and give themselves a soft landing. A lot of the MPs who are expecting to be out there, I mean, it's a rather tougher prospect, rather more worrying.
Yeah, that's another reason why they're all a bit grumpy, or some of them anyway, because they thought they had at least another 4 or 5 months to line up their next jobs, and suddenly they're facing imminent redundancy if they lose their seats. And so, yeah, it is tough. I mean, if you're a big name former cabinet minister, you can normally find a place on a board somewhere or somewhere in the city. If you're someone who's been a junior Conservative minister or just a backbench MP, well, I say just a backbench MP, let's not be pejorative, a backbench Tory MP, it becomes an awful lot harder, because you may be selling expertise about the way that the world of politics works and Westminster works, but frankly, if you're a Conservative, when you could be facing the possibility of 4 or 5 years of Labour government, potentially a decade of Labour government, then your marketability diminishes. And also, of course, there's a question of supply and demand. And suddenly the supply has shot up. And I've spoken to people in the city who say that, in fact, I saw some people in the financial services sector last week who said that they arranged a meeting with the minister thinking it was going to be about government business. And it turned out to be entirely about this minister pitching for a job.
Yeah, I think I may have read that by you
May
in
have
your,
even
in
been
your
written by
paper,
me, yeah.
Nadine, about ministers who shall remain nameless. Actually, I think it was in George's piece, and he didn't name them. A company or a lobbyist or a trade or professional group is all urged into coming for a meeting, which is always welcome if you're a trade association or a professional association. They find out that they're being sounded out to give the minister a job.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal, isn't it? And it's demonstrative how quickly your fortunes can change in politics. But yeah, I mean, their employability isn't great, particularly if they're among some of the MPs who may have said more incendiary things, may have, rode on kind of the wave of being controversial. And the jobs market isn't great at the moment. So much of the stuff that they discussed at arm's length in Parliament for the last 14 years for some of them, is about to become very, very real. And MP salary, which I think is over 90 grand now, it's going to be a big change. And it's going to be difficult to find a job to replace that. So I think that's another reason, as he touched on, that there is frustration with Rishi Sunak from his own MPs, that they haven't had time to prepare for this. I do think there are redundancy packages that MPs get, but even so, it's a big lifestyle shift. And many of them aren't prepared when it comes to career prospects, and some of them may be older as well, and may not be in a position where they can just kind of go out there and enter a jobs market that is maybe better if you're a bit younger.
And I mean, George, if you're a lawyer, a practicing lawyer, in some kind of practice, I guess that's a little bit easier. If you don't have a particular skill to take out there, it can be pretty tough. I think the days have passed where all sorts of companies, huge numbers of companies, would have been very happy to have an ex-MP on their letterhead, just as a sort of non-executive director, just for the sake of the kudos of have an MP on there, because being an MP doesn't have that kind of kudos anymore, does it?
No, I think that's definitely part of the problem. I mean, the other route that many MPs will take will to go and work as lobbyists or public relations advisors and stuff. The problem with that, of course, is that all the PR companies now are looking for people with contacts in the Labour Party. And if you know Keir Starmer, your contacts book is something worth a lot of money to people in the City of London. So it's become very tough for them. And as Nadine was saying, some of these MPs who are stepping down or face losing their seats, probably in their mid-50s. It's a tough time to sort of think about a new career. So it is. I think everyone's going to be getting their very small violins out, thinking about this. But it is. These are people with families to support often, and it's going to be tough.
And in the lobbying trade, as George says, Nadine, or in that sort of sphere, in the comms world, suddenly, without prejudging the election, we don't know what's going to happen. But the fact is that in a climate like now, with opinion polls where they are and have been for a good long time, if you've got an in with the Labour inner circle, if you're a lobbyist, suddenly, those people are in huge demand in that world now, Nadine.
Absolutely. And I think, as a political journalist, you started to see this shift over the last year or so, people have tended to be a bit more interested in Labour Party, information contacts there. And I've spoken to advisors to shadow cabinet ministers, and they were all just kind of like, they were saying to me around this time last year, God, everyone suddenly wants to talk to us. Everyone suddenly cares what we've got to say. And so this kind of tide shift due to the expectation that Labour will win the election has been going on now for around, I would say, with gusto for about a year. And as I said, so many MPs who normally felt kind of ignored have said to me, people actually care. People want to know what I've got to say and want to kind of meet me. And so I think people who had time cultivating those Labour contacts could, again, the election's not been held yet, it's not, the result's not in, but could be about to have all that really to come to bear fruit.
Yeah. I mean, look, maybe the wind will change, maybe the climate will change, maybe the Tory party will look a little more together and upbeat as the campaign wears on. We don't know that, but again, picking up on this theme, some of those rather unhappy Tory MPs have been looking and muttering quietly about Rishi Sunak